Hi everyone, I'm Bill Churchwell, and this is Water Woes. Where does our water really go? Who uses it? And will solutions like desalination come in time? We begin with one of the quietest threats to our region's future, evaporation. It's an invisible drain and also one of the biggest factors in our water crisis. For most of his life, Rogers Weathers has been casting a line from the banks of Choke Canyon, but he's never witnessed this. Have you ever seen the lake this low?
This is my first time in almost 30 years. This is my first time. I've never seen it this low in my life.
Choke Canyon Reservoir is critically low.
We used to have to fish up there on top of the rock.
Entire islands and trees that were once underwater, now exposed.
When the lake level is up, we would actually be in water right now.
Correct, yeah. This will be completely, underwater.
Out of 5 public boat ramps, Park Superintendent Jose Uribe says this is the only one that remains open.
It's just been dropping little by little, little by little. In the last year and a half, that's really when drastically has dropped a whole lot more.
The water level is the lowest it has ever been since it was dammed back in the 1980s.
And now look, it's sickening because I believe the hotter it's gonna get, the lower it's gonna get.
He's not wrong. The largest consumer of our area's lakes isn't cities or industry, it's evaporation. And Alan, y'all looked at numbers dating back all the way to 2010.
Yes, on average, the evaporative loss between Choke Canyon and Lake Corpus Christi per year, that number is nearly 160,000 acre feet. We compared this number to how much we consume on average per year in Nueces and San Patricio counties, and you can see that the evaporative loss is way more than we consume.
This is the watershed.
Dr. Pat Fitzpatrick is with the Atmospheric Science program on campus of Texas A&M Corpus Christi.
On average, it's 50 inches per year from the lake. So you have to have at least 50 inches of input, which is usually from the watershed, from the river system that's coming in to just keep it at a normal rate.
Evaporation is mostly consistent, but gets worse as temperatures rise. Corpus Christi saw some of its hottest years on record in the last 15 years. In 2024, what's the hottest?
We might have slightly more evaporation rates than maybe 10 or 15 years ago in a global warming scenario, but for the most part, it should be about the same.
If temperatures keep rising, can Choke Canyon and Lake Corpus Christi remain viable water sources?
Evaporative loss is a huge part.
We sat down with City Manager Peter Zanoni and Corpus Christi Water's Drew Molly.
There are times in the summer when we're seeing 150 million gallons a day of evaporative loss.
He says that's more than our total water demand of our entire city and the region. City leaders floated a proposal 2 months ago to cover Lake Corpus Christi with floating solar panels to generate electricity and reduce evaporation.
This is something that's on our plans to look at.
But Zanoni says that option would be difficult because the public uses both lakes. Meantime, fishermen like Weathers remain hopeful, but say that recreation, like everything else, is drying up.
You can't even launch a boat down here no more. The water's depleting, it's going, so what are we gonna do?
Chief Meteorologist Alan Holt, along with meteorologist Kristen Walla, took a look at those numbers and what's happening in our watershed.
We poured over the watershed data. We wanted to see exactly where our water is going, what it's doing. We started with percent of average rainfall, and through all of this, we looked at between 2010 and 2024. So in that time frame, watershed, Choke Canyon, Lake Corpus Christi got 91% of average rainfall.
Yeah, so what that translates to for the western watershed is an average inflow of over 230,000 acre feet per year. That's inflow. We also looked at evaporation, what's going out, on average over 157,000 acre feet per year. We do the math, inflow minus evaporation, on average, we have just under 75,000 acre feet available per year.
That's in the western watershed. Then we looked out east, Lake Texana via the Mary Roads pipeline. That number up to 43,000 acre feet per year between 2010 and 2024, leaving us with an average available amount of water in that time of just over 117,000 acre feet.
Yeah, so that's what we have available to use on average. Here's our consumption numbers for San Patricio and Nueces counties alone in 2022, around 130,000 acre feet per year. Comparing that to our average available, that means on average we're in a deficit by over 10,000 acre feet per year.
A late March rainfall might have saved South Texas farmers from a disastrous harvest season, but concerns over long-term water shortages continue to grow. Some say the drought that began in 2011 never truly left, as Lake Corpus Christi and Choke Canyon Reservoir are now shadows of their former selves. The people of San Patricio County know this story all too well. When we talk specifically about groundwater, in San Pat County, the largest volume is said to be used by agriculture. And while yes, we are in a drought, it is far from historic. In the heart of South Texas,
we farm over somewhere between 7,500 and 8,000 acres.
For Bert Ring, the land is both a blessing and a challenge when you depend on the sky to deliver your livelihood.
As the year started, we thought it was going to be an extremely bad year.
A lack of rain forced Ring and others to pump the brakes on sorghum planting that typically starts in February.
We didn't start until the beginning of the next month.
A late March soaking delivered a much-needed boost. Some areas received over 15 inches of rain in just 3 days, more than they had seen in the previous 6 months combined.
After that big rain that we just had, everybody kind of went in and changed up their plans and gone back to all right, we might going to make a crop this year.
While farming and pasture lands are stressed by the lack of rain, it's far from a historic drought. Take a look at these two images, the 2011 drought here on the left and the current drought on the right. Now, nearly 86% of the state was in exceptional drought in 2011. The current drought doesn't even compare. Farmers say it's just not low lakes.
Without the rain, things dry up pretty quick in South Texas.
Bobby McCool with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension says the lack of recent rain creates major uncertainty in crop yield potential.
You see, there's moisture not very far down. So far, we're hanging in, and like most people in Texas, you deal with a drought on seems like a regular basis. When you do get that 4 or 5 inches of rain, that really helps out.
Scientists warn that even when rains do come, they often fail to saturate the soil enough to create meaningful runoff for lakes and rivers.
These are some serious water supply issues.
Dr. Robert Mace, the leading hydrogeologist for the Meadows Center at Texas State, has watched the region's water crisis unfold for over a decade.
We've seen some rains come through, but they're not enough to fully saturate the soils, they are enough to saturate the soils, but we don't get a follow-on rain to create the water to go into our reservoirs.
Dr. Dorina Murgulet, a professor of hydrogeology at Texas A&M Corpus Christi, agrees. She notes that even compared to the severe 2011 drought, current water supplies are in worse shape.
If you think about comparing drought to drought, just the climatological drought, the rain, maybe we're in the same situation. However, since 2011, our water needs have increased. The aquifers have not recovered, and we have been drawing this out of this reservoir. So we have been drawing the groundwater too, which is no longer there to supply.
The safety net, she says, is shrinking. For now, the people of San Pat do what they've always done, endure and wait for rain.
In our area, we got 4+ inches. There's other places that got more than that. That was everything.
So if our reservoirs are not seeing meaningful recovery, what else is contributing to the cause? Amid shrinking water supply levels and growing industry consumption, the city of Corpus Christi is actively seeking alternative water supplies. Roughly, our area consumes 96 million gallons of water every day, but our consumption looks very different from other parts of Texas. Industry now consumes more than half of our area's daily water supply. We'll examine that industrial growth. These companies aren't the bad guys. They were allowed to build here and employ thousands of people, and they too are doing their best to conserve. But will it be enough?
You look at a facility like Gulf Coast Growth Ventures that does use quite a bit of water. They don't make an $8 billion decision to come to this area unless they think they believe that the water is going to be available for the future.
Big industry drives the Texas economy, and the Coastal Bend serves as its engine, with large manufacturers and refineries like Gulf Coast Growth Ventures, Valero, and Citgo. But they aren't just major employers. They're among the area's biggest water consumers, according to Corpus Christi Water COO Drew Mully.
The large volume industry that we serve is 50 to 60% of our total water demand.
Gulf Coast Growth Ventures contracts water through the San Patricio Municipal Water District, which in turn gets its supply from Corpus Christi Water. They used 13.5 million gallons a day in 2024, up from 12.9 million in 2023. Their contract allows them to use up to 22 million. For reference, 1 million gallons a day would cover an entire football field and 2.3 feet of water. It's a demand Dr. Robert Mace of Texas State University's Meadows Center says could be unsustainable.
Texas is growing so fast, and we're also seeing more and more drought. Like, our droughts seem to be getting worse. We seem to be seeing them more frequently, and a lot of the easy water's gone.
As water has become a dwindling commodity in South Texas, many look for someone to blame. But Corpus Christi City Manager Peter Zanoni says industry isn't the villain.
The industry's been here for a long time, for decades. And so our job as leaders in the city is to produce more water.
The San Patricio Municipal Water District's Brian Williams says industry's role can't be overlooked.
With the growth of Gulf Coast Growth Ventures, the Exxon Sabic plant, Still Dynamics, we supplied them with water. So we have been seeing some industrial demand increasing.
However, he believes the situation we are in is more nature-made than man-made.
I don't believe it's a consumption issue. I think it's an environmental issue right now with the evaporation that we're having without rainfall coming into the basin.
3 News research over the past 15 years shows on average, Mother Nature, even factoring for evaporation, provides a net water surplus of 117,000 acre-feet per year. But once we account for recent consumption habits, we're actually at a net loss of over 10,000 acre-feet a year. TAMU CC hydrogeology professor Dorina Murgulet compares it to overdrawing a bank account.
We should be able to look at what resources we have and project how much we can consume, right? But it seems like we overcommit. We think we'll have enough, but we're not doing a good mass balance.
Zanoni says as Corpus Christi courts more industrial business, it's conscious of the city's water limits.
We're not signing anybody up. There's no new customers. Now, we know that they take 3, 4, or 5 years to build some of these facilities, so we are having conversations with some industrial potentials, but it's not for water today. It would be 3, 4 years from now.
Zanoni says the benchmark is selling about 80% of our water supply every year, but even Williams admits right now there might be too many straws in the proverbial cup.
I guess you have to say, have we oversold the water supply? Well, we may have, but it's dependent on anticipated rainfall that has not been coming in as we've seen over the years.
Corpus Christi isn't alone in facing drought. As conditions worsen across Texas and cities upstream demand more water, what begins deep in the Edwards Aquifer might never actually make it to the coast. In Central Texas, scientists and students are tracing how the flow of groundwater connects directly to our water supply. Could our water crisis be tied to what's happening farther upstream? As cities to the north, like San Antonio, use and store more water, experts warn we could be heading toward legal fights. Water woes turning into water wars. In fact, they say it's already happening.
So this is literally a river being born before your eyes.
It starts here at Spring Lake in San Marcos, where groundwater bubbles up from deep within the Edwards Aquifer and begins its long journey downstream.
It's really important to visualize that all of the rain here is flowing underground, and this is where it really does recharge that groundwater supply.
Jessica Polizza is among a group of grad students from Texas A&M Corpus Christi, part of a coastal marine systems course, studying how groundwater from Central Texas directly influences our own coastal waters.
So we are taking samples at the groundwater sources in these streams so we can really measure the radon on in radium and how much is coming up from those springs. You know, we have a drought right now, so we really want to get those measurements and compare with data from previous years.
By comparing those numbers, scientists can see if there is less water emerging.
So what you're seeing here is one of the many locations where groundwater comes out of the Edwards Aquifer.
Professor Jarina Murguled says that's where the concern for cities like Corpus Christi start.
If there isn't rain here, and there isn't enough recharge to the aquifer, the flow in the rivers is much less.
But as cities upstream retain more water for their own growing needs, that leaves places like Corpus Christi far downstream at the mercy of what's left.
Nueces River originates up in the hill country in the Edwards Aquifer, from which San Antonio is drawing water. And they are in a very bad situation right now. As population grows and there is less rain for them, there's less water to go into the stream and traveling downstream to our reservoirs.
At the Meadows Center for Water and the Environment at Texas State, Dr. Robert Mace specializes in aquifer recharge. He says legal disputes over who gets to keep how much water are already starting.
As water becomes scarcer and cities become thirstier, it does set up conflicts of where that water is going to come from. And so currently there's a lawsuit Bryan College Station has against some folks trying to bring water to Central Texas to meet needs.
John Byram, the executive director for the Nueces River Authority, says we could one day see similar conflicts.
Back in 1980, when I got in this business, the saying was whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting. And I thought, well, there's no way. You know, we got plenty of water in Texas. We're there.
Byram says one proposed solution involves diverting water from the Nueces and the nearby Atascosa River into the Choke Canyon Reservoir.
Absolutely, and that would solve two problems. Number one is it would augment the levels in Choke Canyon. Number two would solve a flooding issue that is south of the Corpus Christi Dam.
A short pipeline just over a mile long could connect the systems. Funding has already been secured by the NRA to study the feasibility. Byram says securing more water sources is key. The Nueces River Authority is currently working with the Port of Corpus Christi to get a lease on Harbor Island to build a giant desal plant there. That could come online by 2030. The city's plan to turn seawater into salvation. The city now holds all permits to build its first desal plant. But will desalination solve our growing water emergency or create environmental problems? And is it too little too late? City Manager Peter Zanoni says design is about 15% complete, but the plant won't be operational until 2028, the result of a decade of delays and disputes. Is a desal plant the answer? A simple question.
We should have done it sooner.
With a complicated answer.
Doesn't mean that we need to raise the cost of water.
Probably. We took to folks outside the Nueces County Courthouse.
Is desal really going to solve all our problems? I'm not sure.
The city of Corpus Christi is pushing ahead with what leaders say is a major solution, a seawater desalination plant. It would produce 36 million gallons of fresh water a day, a third of what we use now. A solution City Manager Peter Zanoni said is way overdue.
It's almost as if that plant really should have come online 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and it was slowed a little bit to get more community input.
Zanoni and Corpus Christi Water COO Drew Molly sat down with 3 News for an in-depth discussion as the city races to diversify our water supply and take the stress off our lakes.
It's not like we're not going to continue to use it, but it will allow that lake. And California is a little interesting. They say we let our reservoirs heal, we let them rest. Well, you know, in similar fashion, that's what we want to do.
But they say one desal plant won't be enough. They're already in the permitting process for a second one, and they're not alone in exploring the idea.
Texas is watching us, the country and the world are watching us.
The Nueces River Authority is also moving forward with the Port of Corpus Christi on a Harbor Island desal plant. John Byram, the executive director for the NRA, believes it will be a long-term solution.
And we found this huge water deficit that's been going on for several years. And we decided, hey, we need to build this bigger. So the ultimate capacity of the Harbor Island facility that we're planning is 450 million gallons per day. That's a big plant. That would be about the 3rd largest desal plant in the world.
12 times larger than the city's plant. The initial phase will top out at about 100 million gallons a day, with the option to expand.
Desal is here to stay. And I know it's going to cost a lot of money.
Without any doubt, there will be a rate impact to all customer classifications, but it is minimized by several things, like the state helping us with the loans that we're issuing. That'll save us $130 million over the life of the project.
Zanoni says the cost of desal is an investment critical to future growth.
What we know today is that until we get our desal plant up and running in about 3 years from now, and until the reservoirs, western reservoirs, rebound, we're not signing anybody up.
The bottom line, what would happen to Corpus Christi if we don't get desal?
We would be in trouble.
Molly says the city has done its research, visiting successful plants in Florida and California.
The mayor of Santa Barbara, her name is Helene Schneider. I've spoken to her several times. She would tell you that in Santa Barbara, their saving grace was desal.
A saving grace even scientists believe we can't avoid.
My crystal ball says seawater desalination.
Dr. Robert Mace, one of the state's leading water experts, says despite concerns of environmental impacts and expense.
Cheap water's gone. There is something more expensive than seawater desalination. Water is no water.
Dr. Dorina Merguland with Texas A&M Corpus Christi says despite the dire water shortage, we will most likely not run out of water if the city brings in other supplies like desal. Also keep in mind, even if we reach 0% in our western supplies, the city also has its eastern supplies made up of Lake Texana and the Colorado River. They're also hoping to bring more water wells online along the Nueces River. Thank you for joining us for this critical look at our ongoing water situation.